I want you to Google the Bath Riots, okay? And I also want you to go and check out Historias Unknown. They're on TikTok and on Instagram. This is something that I've talked to my family about before, and everybody was like, I have a house in El Paso. I live in El Paso. I love El Paso. I have rebaptized myself as an El Pasonian. Probably one of the few Dominicans here, but hey. But back in June 28, 1917, there was a 17-year-old Carmelita that said, I had enough. I had enough of being humiliated simply because I am Mexican. I'm going to explain to you what was happening. So there was this fear of disease, right? But the fear went beyond that, right? It went beyond disease to being catching on stereotypes of how others saw Mexican people coming across the border. That is really where the fear hinged, because these bats were happening first under the reason that we got to make sure that we contain any physical contamination that comes across the border, right? But then people started seeing only Mexicans as being the only ones that could have had that, when we all know, right, that disease like can spread throughout, regardless of ethnicity or race. It just spreads, right, from body to body, regardless of how that body looks. And that's what I said, that it went beyond just doing this for healthy reasons or to keep the population safe, right? It tapped into that xenophobia, right? That is still so prevalent here, the fear of outsiders, of foreigners. And that day on 1917, Carmelita said, I had enough. I have enough of this humiliation that is occurring every time I come over here just to try to do my job. She was a maid in El Paso, crossing the border from Juarez, and every day she had to strip down. People had to search her hairy parts, and then she was doused with these chemicals. And I want y'all to Google the Bath Riots and also go listen to Historia Unknown podcast so you can listen more about it, because I'm going to give you the wave tops of this. And she did that, and other ladies saw that, and then they followed her lead, right? And eventually one, Carmelita, turned to being thousands of women that saw in Carmelita the outrage, the motivation that they needed to say, you know what, this is wrong. Why are we doing this? Why not other people, right, that are also crossing but happen to be white? How come they're not doing this? How come it's just us? And something in them sparked that outrage, that mentality of, this is enough. We're no longer gonna do this. And I'm just sharing this because there usually comes a point in the habits of injustice where people say, you know what, that's enough. You know, this is where we draw the line. The cruelty, the humiliation has gone on for far too long. You're testing the boundaries now. You are testing how much cruelty you can get away with at this point. So we're stopping it right here. And I think that's what's happening right now, right? With the protests, that it has just been enough. Enough of the humiliation, enough of the racial profiling, enough of just grabbing people without due process, enough of the absence of dignity and respect when taking care of other human beings. Enough of that. Because now what we're seeing now compared to what was happening in 1917, right here where I live, is not too far away from one another. Is that fear of outsiders, xenophobia, and it's also that dehumanization of people that are not part of the norm. You know, that's what happened then that created the perfect scenario for people to use the excuse of health services of protecting the population of El Paso from diseases, and they use that as an excuse to mistreat other people, because this occurred way into the 1950s when the risk and the threat of those diseases and other things were no longer there. And it also only continued on that population, on the Mexican population coming across the border. See, so that's what I'm saying. It's like often we hinge these rational things, right? And but what we're doing is we wrapping these rational things around our illogical fears, xenophobia, racism, any of the isms, right? And that's what we're doing. And we're doing that to excuse ourselves, to excuse our actions when it comes to dehumanization and violence being inflicted on other people. So that's what we're seeing here. And just be aware of that, so that way you understand and you catch yourself before you get thrown into that spiral of using the humanizing language, and then starting to use now excuses, right? And then just wrapping your fear, right, with those excuses in order to make yourself feel better as to why you think it's right for people to be treated the way that they're being treated right now. Because of, regardless of documentation, these are people that shouldn't be treated that way. And like I always tell my stepchildren, you know, how would you feel if that was you? And don't lie to yourself. Don't lie to yourself. Don't lie to me in order to win the argument. Just like I said, I tell my stepchildren, don't lie. Don't say, I wouldn't care, you know, or anything like that, just because you want to win that argument. I want you to be very real and honest with yourself. How would you feel if that was happening to you? That's it. That's the question that I have. That's it. And the answer shouldn't be, well, it will never happen to me. Well, that's not happening to me. No. Answer the damn question. How would you feel if that was happening to you? Would you be outraged? Would you want it to stop? Would you demand for dignity and respect, for due process? How would you feel? And I wish more people would have paid attention to that lesson in kindergarten, that golden rule of treat others the way that you would want to be treated, because I think we wouldn't be in a lot of situations if that was the case. But I think we skipped over that, or we forgot about it, or we're thinking because we're big and grown and adults and we know all these things that we no longer need to rely on that. But the thing is that it's our empathy that makes us the humans that we are. And when we lose that thing that makes us big and strong and being these superb beings here on this earth. And we're nothing better than other beings that don't feel empathy, that can't rationalize through feelings and logic. If all we're using is logic, then we are allowing our fears to hide within that logic. And then we're saying that that is right. That's why we need to go forward using both. Listen to your gut. Listen to your emotions, to your feelings. What is it telling you? Let go of the fear. Let go of how you see other people. Let go of that. Just look at them as people. Look at them as if they're you. Look at them as if they're one person that you love so much. How would you feel if that was happening to the one person that you love? Because those people have a person that loves them just as much. and that they're going through it because they're being treated as if they're nothing but a number. So think about that. You're better than this. You are better than this.